Hey everyone, we are here for our next talk. We have Gaurav, and he'll be doing a talk on matching a private liquidity pool for perpetual futures. And I'll let him take it from here.
All right, thanks for the introduction. I don't see much activity in the chat, so can you guys tell me you can hear me? Hello, hello. Mic test, 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, 6, 7. Are you guys there? All right, that makes sense. Let's get on with it. Also to note, I will do a short pause after around 15 minutes into the talk, so that if there's any questions, you guys can ask me there. So if you can keep rolling your questions and ask me a question section, I can take a brief pause and answer them. All right, let's get on with it. I'm going to pause my video. So I'm talking about zk-Matchbook. It's a matching engine designed for a zero-knowledge chain, which will be dealing with perpetual features. And this is a joint work with Hamad Tariq and Usman Shahid, and they might be joining us through the audience today. So a little bit of my background. I used to be a hardware entrepreneur, got into crypto somewhere around 2018, dabbled into a few projects, and I'm really proud to announce that I am the nominee for the Best Hair in Ethereum 2020 award. Thanks to James Presswich, and I hope I can win it. Also, a little bit of shout out to my Twitter. I have like 27 followers, so it'd be great if you guys can throw me some love and follow me. All right. Also, our docs are up, so you can go to docs.twilight.finance if you want to look at detailed spec. It's still in the works though, and it's not formally written. So if we say randomness instead of a prime field, don't judge us. Our demo will be out soon, in a week or two. Right now, we are just testing out a few things, and if you'll click on demo on the website, it'll just take you to a positive selected link. A little bit of context. So we have built Twilight, and Twilight is an anonymous by default tailless VM for Ethereum as a layer 2. And the way we achieve anonymity here is through QuizQuiz, which is a paper that came out back in 2018. And for the VM, we have partially forked zk VM, and then we have introduced our own opcodes on top of it. But for the purposes of today's talk, I would just be looking at the zk-Matchbook part and not be talking about Twilight. That's a separate conversation altogether. All right, so a little bit of motivation here. So we have our good friends, Jack and Ryan, and Jack and Ryan have some precious assets, and they want to trade them. The easiest way for them to do this is they find each other and they swap it. The second easiest way is that they find a bookie. So the Jack would go and say, I want to buy. Ryan would go and say, hey, I want to sell. And this bookie, since he has this information for both of them, he can match them. So when you do this electronically in an exchange setting, they call this in an order book. Sometimes also call a central limit order book if the exchange permits doing limit orders. And matching engine is looking at opening trades, selling trades, doing liquidations, indexing the database, calculating the funding rate, and whatnot. And it turns out that every different market requires a different matching engine. So for spot order book, it's a pretty straight out. You have asset to asset transfers. For margin order book, it gets a bit complicated because now you're borrowing assets, you're paying interest, you're paying back those assets. For perp order book, it gets even more complicated because now you have liquidations involved, and sometimes it could be quantitative liquidations, it could be inverse liquidations, these could be linear liquidations, and then there is funding involved, and then there's already this margin component there. So for today's talk, I'm going to focus on this perp order book part. I assume that people might be able to follow what margins and liquidations are. but they might be confused about funding if they are hearing about this for the first time. So I'm just gonna take a dive at it. It kind of represents, from a broader perspective, the skew in the order book. Also, if you're wondering what long and short is just a fancy way of saying I've bought, which is which is long, and I've sold, which is short. So if there's more longs and if there are less shorts, there's a skew in the order book. In that case, the funding is positive, in which case long will be paying short. And if the opposite side, then short end up paying long. And I know if you have done futures trading before, you might be going like, oh, dude, there's like a futures price, which is converging to the index price. Well, if you know what futures are, you know what futures are. But if you don't, this is a very good intro for that. So back to our matching engine. So we kind of discussed the centralized possibility. Now let's talk about a decentralized order book. And we're going to let go of our friend Jack here. And we're going to introduce this high frequency market maker. And this market maker is going to come in with some demands. Well, is there any lost look liquidity, which is also just a fancy way of saying, can I withdraw my codes? Can I ping the order book to look at the liquidity available? How fast is the liquidation process? Well, this is all public. So what kind of information leakage are we looking at? Well, order book is very naive in case of a decentralized setting. It says, well, market maker, I don't need you. I'm going to call some of my other friends who are these liquidity providers. And these liquidity providers are going to give all of their money to me. And I'm going to create a pool. And I'm going to use this pool to trade with Jack and Ryan. Well, that sounds pretty exciting. But apparently it's not. It kind of opens up a bigger problem, which is, oh man, what happens if I lose money? Well, that's just the beginning of the problem. The bigger problems are, can I withdraw anytime? If I'm logged in a transaction, I am actually locked there, and maybe I'm getting wrecked and I can't get out. What happens when people don't arbitrage? If they don't arbitrage, then maybe the order book is skewed on one side and I won't be able to make any profits. Or what if that they do arbitrage and then they balance out the order book? In that case, I'm not making any profit. So how does that work? Well, on top of all of this, now we have these amazing layer 1 privacy protocols coming in. And their pitch is, we're going to make everything so dark that even DC Universe would be embarrassed of themselves. Well, the point being, then can you still scalp the order book? Is candlestick still going to be a thing? I am almost assuming that order depth is going to go away. Maybe I can trust the funding, maybe I can't. Can I do iceberg orders to maybe have some confidentiality on my order sizes? Well, these were the bunch of questions that we looked at, and we said, all right, maybe let's look for some solutions. So it turns out that people were smarter than us, and then they already solved these problems in the financial markets. And the way to do this is in the US, when you apply to become an exchange, you first become an ATS. So you become an alternative trading system. And as an ATS, you cannot actually operate a regular order book. You need to operate something called a Twilight Pool. Now, what is a Twilight Pool? Well, Twilight Pool is like this, something in between a lit pool and a dark pool. A lit pool where everything is public, order sizes, prices, everything is public. And dark pools is where nothing is public. And I think one of the examples would be dark pools and Kraken and other exchanges. And with Twilight Pool, the idea is that you reveal the information not at the execution of the trade, but you reveal the information after some delay. And what that means is maybe after 7 days or something, you would reveal that there was 250 shares that was traded at this price. Maybe you just reveal the price and you don't reveal individual trades. Maybe you just reveal the total volume of the exchange. And there's like no strict regulations there. It kind of depends on cases to cases. also take that with a grain of salt. It's a very complicated system. So when we looked at our design, we said we need to kind of integrate this idea of a Twilight Pool into this DeFi ecosystem. And the way we think about it is that we can create a liquidity pool that's going to have a single token. So no two tokens and no constant function market makers. And because there's only single token, we need to feed it with a price. And to make it more public, we want to have a funding rate that's coming through an oracle. So that's the liquidity side. And then there's a trader side. Just to give you a sense of what's private here, a little bit again in the design, it's this chart. A little bit too much to read, but if you will see here, everything that's related to the pool aspect of things is private, and only position size is public as far as the trading aspect of this is concerned. If you understand what margin means, if you understand what leverage is, those things are private. And if you don't understand that, here comes the next slide. So the idea behind margin is you put some deposit in the exchange, and that acts as your margin, and that is private. Your margin is then multiplied with some leverage. This is the borrowing action on the exchange. That still remains private. And now this position size that comes out of multiplying it with the price is public. And now what this does is now nobody can know what your margin is by looking at the position size, because there is this external variable of leverage, and nobody knows what your leverage is. What this also does is privatizes the funding payment. And also I'm using private again and again. I should say this is confidential, not anonymous. So it makes it confidential as far as the funding payments are concerned, and then the funding rate is public. So what does this help with? It helps with traders now can scalp the order book. Funding rate can be calculated externally, and now you can create something like the limit order book where you can show the order depth. And if you're really, really, really concerned about your privacy, you can just put in a dark order. And in case of a dark order, we'll make the position size private as well. But in that case, the funding rate that would be applicable on the exchange would be the funding rate that is calculated with public parameters and not with dark parameters, because this is one of the other challenges where you want to prove that the funding rate is calculated properly with the right amount of variables in it. So, all right, this is another slide which is going into funding rate. But before I talk from here on out, I want to go back to questions and see if anybody has any. Is there a question box which is empty? All right, so how do liquidity providers benefit? It's coming in my slides. What are the parameters? I don't know what you mean by parameters. Can you talk a little bit more? What does the hero part mean? Yeah, it just means I have cool hairs. All right. So I think those are the only questions there. Back to the slides. All right, so in order to calculate the funding rate, we compare it with the total position size. So it has nothing to do with the total pool. We look at the total long positions, and then we look at total short positions. We subtract them, and then we divide with the total position size, which is basically just total long plus the total short. And then we just square it. And then because we are charging funding every hour, we also divide it by 8 at some point. All right, so that was that. This is where the cryptography part comes in. So how do we generate the deposit or the order transaction? Well, with all these zero-knowledge proof systems, the common narrative is that you have a delegated operator, and because you own like a $20 iPhone, which doesn't have a very good processing capacity, you're gonna give the witness to this delegated operator, and he's gonna create the proof. What what witness means. Witness means that whatever amount you're spending, you're going to provide this variable to the operator. Well, apparently that doesn't sound good for privacy. I think that's where we realized that running a prover in the browser is really, really, really important. And we came up with this very small constraint. That constraint is a very basic constraint. Say you have like $1,000 in your account, and if you only want to lock in like 5 tokens to the exchange, then you just do 1,000 minus 5, you get some remainder, and then on that, you just do a range proof. Now, it turns out if all you want to prove is something is in the range and it's positive, pairing is a very heavy machinery to do that. So we just ended up going with bulletproof. I also saw there were a bunch of cryptographers this morning in the chat, and I was not prepared for a technical talk. So this is the 4th slide in there. So if you are interested into this, the public key and the commitment is coming from the QuickBooks account format. Then there's signature, which is a Schnorr proof of knowledge of secret key. And then there's a program stack. Here you would be able to see that the initial margin is being committed on, converted into an expression, then negated, and then you add the expressions, and then you do a range group on it. It's a very stack-based script-like approach. Then we do a time lock, and the time lock basically guarantees that if the operator goes offline at some point, you will be able to retrieve your balance. And then there are some clear text values. Since the commitment is a Pedersen commitment, you need to provide the blinding factor, but the only blinding factor we do provide is for the deposit or the margin that you're putting in. Your original balance in the account still remains private. Some of the performance parameters. So our proof size is around 800 bytes. Prover time comes out to be around 100 milliseconds, and verification time is around 2 milliseconds. If you're curious how the QuickBooks transaction performs, it's in a doc. QuickBooks transactions takes about 30 milliseconds, and verification is around 10 milliseconds there. Again, back to the matching engine talk. So now we know how order transactions look like. So we have a public position size, but the margins are private. And now we know how funding rate is calculated. We know there's a price feed. Now what's next? So the matching works very similarly to how any other relayer like 0x would work. You have the settlements happening on chain, and you're monitoring for solvency of the transactions off chain. And then it just proves to the chain that the computation is correct. One example for this is liquidation. So once we know that the position has gone under, we just put a constraint on it. If you're looking for the stack for this, I'm not going to show it. I'm assuming like there's a mixed audience today. So just put this constraint, and you prove this constraint, and then you create a QuickBooks transaction, and this preserves your anonymity, this preserves your confidentiality, and you're good to go. All right. So I'm going to take another gear now. So a little bit outside the cryptography part. Someone asked me about incentives, and that's what I'm talking about today. You have, for LP returns, unmatched funding rate. So in our design, we charge funding rate every hour. So this unmatched funding rate goes to the liquidity providers. Then we have unmatched open interest P&L. And then we have liquidation margins. And then there's like relayer specific incentives. So what does this unmatched funding rate look like? Say you have around $10 million worth of long positions, and you have $8 million worth of short positions. In this scenario, the funding rate is going to be positive, and long will pay short. What that means in simple English is the difference between the funding payment would be earned by the pool. And this is not a continuous payment. If you'll look into a doc, you'll realize that we are a stateless system. And to maintain the integrity of that statelessness, we cannot necessarily pay continuous funding. And that's why when we do charge a funding, the rest of it just goes to the liquidity providers. Another thing is the unmatched open interest. So what that basically means, for the simplicity of this conversation, let's assume there are $10,000 worth of longs, $10 million worth of longs, $8 million worth of short positions. If the price goes up, there's unrealized P&L for longs, which is around $500,000, and there's unrealized P&L for shorts, which have lost, and this is around $400,000. So the difference of this gets earned by the pool, which is around $100,000 in this case. All right, that was a lot of stuff to go through, and I want to be considerate with my time. Things that I completely left out, that is almost everything. We have not touched on how pool state is calculated, how lens settlement works, how quiz actually works, and there's like so much stuff that's covering in 20 minutes is just like, it's too much. So please refer to the docs. They are up, and we'll be updating the docs. And we have a Discord community, and you should definitely join it. Not many people there right now. So again, looking at the bigger picture, I try to give you a flavor of what zk-Matchbook actually looks like. And there's a lot there, which is photography specific, and there's a lot there, which is there on mechanism design specific. And just look at the doc. All right, so time for questions. All right, so I'm looking at the questions bar, and I see no questions. That's cool, I guess.
Cool. So if there are no questions, we can transition to our next talk or take a short break. Gaurav, do you have any last thoughts, closing thoughts?
Oh, I think I covered everything. Can you link a white paper? Yeah, so you can look at QuizQuiz. It's QUIS.
Drop the link,
And I will drop a link. I will have to look up QuizQuiz on ePrint. All right, there you go. Here's the link. And this link can also be found in our doc, which is Twilight.finance.
Awesome.
All right. Great.
All right. Thanks, Gaurav. This was a really great talk.
All right. Thanks a lot, Jim.
All right. So we have 8 minutes till our next presentation, and it'll be from Jan on secure enclaves for blockchain applications. He's part of the he was part of the Stanford cryptography group, and yeah, so we'll be back.